Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
In the book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, authors and Jungian psychologists Robert Moore and Douglas Gillette expose a masculine problem of epic proportions by asking the following question. Where are the initiated men of power today? They go on to talk about this problem in the following excerpts, which I've taken from different bits and pieces from the introduction of the book. They say, we need to take very seriously the disappearance of ritual processes for initiating boys into manhood. In the case of men, there are many who either had no initiation into manhood or who had pseudo-initiations. And this is Dominic just kind of stepping in for a moment. Pseudo-initiations could be fraternity rituals, gang initiations that failed to evoke the needed transition into adulthood. Therefore, we get the dominance of boy psychology. Boy psychology is everywhere around us, and its markers are easy to see. Among them are abusive and acting out behaviors against others, both men and women, passivity and weakness, and the inability to act effectively and creatively in one's own life. Because there is little or no ritual process in our society capable of boosting us from boy psychology to man psychology, we each must go on our own, with each other's help and support, to the deep sources of masculine energy potentials that lie within us all. End quote. Now, if you think about it, our initiation rituals into adulthood look something like getting a driver's license at age 16 or 17 and the ability to drink at age 21. These legal allowances do very little to nothing in preparing boys for the real responsibilities of adulthood. And that's why we've got so many little boys running around in men's bodies, fucking up relationships, businesses, and governments. This is one of the reasons why the Great Man Within community exists, to create the masculine rituals and rites of passages that we missed at the most pivotal times of our lives so we can step more fully into our masculine potentials. So today, we're joined by an inspiring brother who, like me, found his calling to leave the corporate world and establish a community for men who want to do this work. His name is Wiancek, and he is the founder of Modern Renaissance Man. Modern Renaissance Man is a community that empowers the modern man with brotherhood and resources needed to lead with truth, integrity, and style. Now, I learned about Voy and his work with Modern Renaissance Man through one of the men in our community, Colin Bly. So shout out to Colin. Thank you. And I've since joined the MRM community, which has a really reasonable $35 a month membership fee. I've had my first chance to attend one of their meetings. And I got to tell you, this group of guys are passionate, energetic, and committed to the work. They're also a diverse community of men. So if you've been looking for a community that has a representative men of color population, check out Modern Renaissance Man. They're doing it really well over there. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what a rite of passage is and why it's essential for unearthing your masculine potential. Voy shares a really inspiring story of his rite of passage experience that took him into the desert on his own with no food or shelter for 4 days, and what he learned there and how he came back a changed man. We'll talk about examples of masculine rituals like Voy's Sacred 6 morning ritual, the 6 things he does every single morning before he turns to the outside world that cultivate your masculine power, presence, and leadership abilities. And then finally, we talk about rituals that you can use in group settings, in work, or when leading men's gatherings to create deep spaces for connection and exploration. Enjoy today's episode on masculine rituals and rites of passage featuring Voy Wiancek. You know, Brian, it's a special opportunity every so often that we get when we do an episode like this, where we get to interview another man who has dedicated his life's work to helping other men walk this inner journey. Now, you've just met this man a few moments ago, and we'll introduce him in a second. But before we do, what has been your impression and the impact that this man has had on you so far in just the few moments that you've met him?
Dude, steady and deep. Really present, man. I'd really appreciate just the last 10 minutes of us getting to know each other. I can feel your presence, and that's not an easy thing to do on Zoom. So it's a beautiful cadence you have, man.
Appreciate that. It means a lot.
And you know what? So Wiancek, which is a beautiful name, and I want you to get into that story. Welcome to the show first, buddy. It's great to have you here.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. And it's just a blessing to share this space with just two strong men like you. So I'm excited. Thank you.
That's special. And it's cool, Brian, that you said steady and deep because, boy, I know one of the things that like you expound is instead of going wide, go deep, right? So maybe talk a little bit about what it means for you to go deep, and also tell a little bit about the origin story of your name, because Wiancek, and make sure I pronounce that correctly, was not always something you wore as a badge of honor, but now you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd definitely love to start there with regards to my name. So to give you guys some insight, my full name is Wojtek Wiancek. And the Voy has just been something that stuck, and everybody started calling me that. And it actually means joyful warrior. It's funny because at the core essence of who I am, joy seems to be that one characteristic that I always lean towards. However, in Poland, of course, it was a popular name. It was similar to like a Michael. And long story short, after the death of my sister, my father went to the US, came back one night, told us to pack our bags at the age of 8, and we came to the United States. Extreme culture shock, loss of community, loss of importance. And I went to essentially dive deep into the culture here. And through that journey, of course, my name is not easily pronounced. It's not spelled regularly like it would be here. So I actually developed a lot of fear and just shame around my name and my culture because I was casted as an outsider for the most part. So throughout my journey through elementary school, high school, even up to college, I always felt shame towards my name and where I was from because I felt like there was that one little kid who in first grade laughed at me because of my name. And then that stuck deep, went really deep. And that became sort of the lens that I would see the world through. So that whenever there was an opportunity and there was name calling, my body would already start to trigger these senses of anxiety, of fear. And I would just restrict, pull away, and just hide my power. So it's been a long journey. And instead of going wide, I decided to go deep into those triggers, right? Because I see triggers as teachers. And whenever those triggers or action signals would come up, I would ask myself, what is this teaching me? And as I got deeper and deeper into the exploration of my soul, I got to find out that little gem where I was just afraid of who I am and who I was truly. In that space, I get to uncover that little fear and change it into freedom, which is now how I rock it. And been on that wave since.
So Voy, you founded a community called Modern Renaissance Man, which I had the pleasure of experiencing last night. I've recently joined. I had a chance to meet your community of men last night, and it was a beautiful thing to witness. Why don't you tell us about the origin stories of how you founded the group, and then bring us up to present day on who the group is, what we all stand for, et cetera?
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for creating that space for me to share this story, because it's definitely something that speaks truly to my heart and my soul. At the age of 19, I had what we would call a spiritual awakening. And essentially in a month span, the love of my life at the time, my first love, gave me my first heartbreak. My dream car, if you're a car fanatic, I had a Subaru WRX STI, which I worked very hard for. And it got stolen 3 weeks after I bought it. And then a week after that, one of my best friends tried to commit suicide. So everything just came tumbling down on me. And I went, as you mentioned before, I went deep instead of wide. And in that journey, in that space, I challenged myself to get out of it. And I started reading books, and that led me on the journey of entrepreneurship and self-development. And I always knew there was this deep calling, this deep yearning for the exploration of self. However, I had friends, but never really resonated with them to the point where they became brothers. And as I got into corporate, graduating college, the value that society has essentially showed me as a man attached to money, to status, and that started to fuel my ego. So when I was in corporate, I was driving all my actions from the ego because I was starting to learn the science of achievement. However, I didn't understand the art of fulfillment. And as I got deeper into that, I was in that space, and I met this guy, and he says, "Hey man, I see a lot of resonance in you. There's something I actually don't like about you. However, I want to get to know you more. He said, I got a book club, and I know you're a guy who reads books. You're into self-development. I would love for you to come by and we just jam out about the topic of books. And I said, you know what? Let's do it. I'm curious what this is. I'm about it. So he invited me to his space. It was a small living room. It was just me and him. And we just started talking about the book. And next thing you know, the conversation went past the surface level and went deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And we got into the real shit, the shit that I never really spoke about to any other man. And as I came out of that meeting, I honestly just felt liberated. I felt liberated, like shackles just came off of me. And I was just like, holy shit, I feel like I could take over the world. And I didn't take any drugs. I didn't do anything crazy, no breath work. It was just a conversation between another man who was there witnessing me in my truth. And in that moment, I was just like, man, this is something special. I said, yo, let's do this again. And he's like, cool. So we invited all our friends. I showed up to the living room. Nobody's there.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, shit, man, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. Maybe guys just don't fuck with this. They don't resonate. Maybe we should try something else. And I was like, no, let's do it again. So we did it again. Invited all my friends. Only one guy showed up. And this guy again felt the medicine. And he's like, yo, you guys need to keep doing this. So we sat down to the drawing board and we said, maybe reading and books isn't something that calls guys in. I was a fitness influencer at the time, affiliated with this gym. I was like, wait, my friend's a pro MMA fighter. Maybe we could put him on the cover and say, yo, this guy's in the cage, beating the shit out of people, being just an animal, steps out of the cage and gets grounded and deep in his presence and his soul.
Yeah.
Let's use that as the forefront, as the Easter egg. We did that, pulled guys into a room, closed the door, dropped in with breathwork, dropped in with meditation, and just opened up the space to go below the surface. And in that moment, there was a gentleman close to his 40s. He was a designer for Tupac, Wu-Tang, Raekwon. He was just a very, very inspirational guy that I looked up to. And he came up to me and he said, boy, this session was the most impactful session I had in the last 20 years. He's like, whatever you guys are doing, don't stop. And I looked over at my co-founder, Jose, at the time, and he had tears in his eyes. My eyes were watery. And I was like, whatever this is, let's take it to the next level. And then soon enough, we just put our skills together. I quit corporate, he quit. And we just started taking like brand partnerships and connections that we have and just putting events together to become the modern Renaissance man. So in short, modern Renaissance man became the movement that's inspiring conscious leadership in the modern man. And through brotherhood, resources, and events, we inspire men to lead with truth, integrity, and style. And to us, a modern Renaissance man is a man that integrates the mind, body, soul, style, and brotherhood. So in short, that's how modern Renaissance man was formed.
Thanks for sharing that story, man. I feel like I've been part of your journey now. Like I can see some of that evolution. And it sounds like you were back in your corporate days, you're still in self-development. You said you had that yearning for self-exploration before doing any of this work. And I'm curious, like, how long did you do that for? And what was it like on your own compared to even that first moment that you dropped in at Book Club 1?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. So the self-exploration work essentially was about 7 years that I was on. And truthfully, I had a pretty skewed understanding on how to properly go deep into my soul, because everything I thought was just input. Just give me more information, read more books. I was reading like 40, 60 books a year, just nonstop reading. However, I didn't have the presence to stop and actually say, how can I integrate this? How can I actually apply this to my life? So I was just getting info, but not really doing anything with it. So I would say it was about 6 years of that, just getting input and not actually doing anything with the output.
To that point, one of the things that we've just started saying here is to the men who are listening to this podcast, you don't need more content. You need more community, right? I mean, like most guys have an overabundance of content. How many more podcasts are you going to listen to? How many more books do you need to read? How many more experts do you need to follow before you recognize that the thing that you are actually seeking can never come from the most exquisitely designed piece of content, which is connection. And connection comes through community. And most men have an abject shortage of community in their lives. One of the things I thought that was brilliant, you called it an Easter egg, right? You created this Easter egg of, hey, I'm going to put out an MMA fighter who's like masculine, who's tough, who's beating the shit out of people as kind of the Trojan horse. We call it Trojan horsing, right? And so meet guys where they're at and then feather in some of this other stuff that they want that they don't know yet that they want and they desire on a deeper level. Let's transition into this conversation, Voy, about the importance of rituals and rites of passage for men to transcend who they are presently, right? To evolve to a deeper level of who they are. And you went through an informal, I would call it rite of passage at age 19, when you talk about the woman breaking your heart, your car being stolen, and your best friend trying to commit suicide. I mean, when that happens, it's basically your ego and who you thought you were is dying like one painful and shocking death because it happened boom, boom, boom. When the ego dies in that form, it gives way to kind of that strange state of transition, right? Where there is no center point, but that is like the precursor to reconstituting yourself as someone else. So maybe can you talk a little bit about either that experience, or I know you've been through a formal rite of passage. What does it mean, a rite of passage? Why doesn't it exist today in our society? And then what did you go through that helped you to find that new level of who Voy is and that depth that you talk about?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question and such a potent conversation to share with you guys. Truthfully, as men, we all go through rites of passage of some sort of initiation. However, it's the intention that makes all the difference. In the community that I was involved here, it was very dangerous when I was growing up. So there was a lot of initiations going around here with gangs, and guys would get initiated into gangs. However, the intention wasn't anything that would be in terms of self-exploration or stepping into manhood. It was just something to be a part of because, well, we didn't have the community, as you spoke about. We felt like we were always alone and we yearned that brotherhood. So joining a gang seemed like the right thing to do. Now, with regards to rites of passages, any culture that you look into, on land from ancestral wisdom, there's always a rites of passage that was concluded. Women, they have the natural cycle. So when they get their actual cycle, that becomes their initiation into womanhood, right? Maturity. However, for us men, we never had that. Mm-hmm. So if you look at different cultures, like let's say some cultures in Africa, they actually take the children, kidnap them in the middle of the night, take them into a month-long journey where the kid has to fight, he has to hunt, he has to survive with food or water. His name even gets changed. Mm-hmm. And when he comes back into the actual community, the mother doesn't even call him a son. They just call him by the name. And that becomes a point, a transition where this boy turns into a man because he has to take full responsibility of his life. And I think responsibility is a big key player in a rites of passage. Huge. Because there's a lot of boys right now in society that are growing old, but they're never actually growing up.
That's big, man. Growing old, but not growing up.
Right. And it's essentially boys just walking in an older meat suit who are looking for confidence, for purpose, for responsibility to take. Right. So for me, when I got first introduced to this, it was through Jetty Azuma. Jetty Azuma is a rites of passage guide, and he's a men's coach on the West Coast, and he's a mentor of ours. And we flew Jetty for our event. And Jetty has been working with the Lakota Nation, and he's been sitting in that pool of wisdom. So he shared it with us. And it just sparked like this craziest interest. I saw guys in the desert sitting there with no food, no water. I was like, holy shit, this is badass. I got to get involved with this. And so I signed up. And truthfully, leading up to that experience, every single fear you could think of was coming up. I was like, I'm going to be sitting in Death Valley with no food, barely any water, by myself, no tent. I'm crazy. I'm going to die. I'm going to do this. And all of this fear started to arise.
How many days was that supposed to be?
So we were out there for 9 days fully.
Holy
and then 4 days by yourself.
Okay. Without food, without water, without a tent in a desert.
So we had water just for the 4 days. However, no food, no tent, just sitting in a desert with everything just coming down on you. So leading up to that, of course, there is a whole process where we get to discover exactly what this means to us and set the intention so that when we cross that threshold, we embody exactly what we wanted to say, right? How we want to show up as the man that we're going to show up in today's world. So when we got there and we got to the desert, we did a lot of men's work around the fire. And then they said, all right, boys, it's time to go out. Go find your spot, whatever calls to you. Ask nature, ask the universe, ask spirit to tell you where that spot is and just sit. And so we did. I found my spot and we went in. And truthfully, that was the most impactful experience because all these different distractions, the phone, the job, the this, the girl, the that, was taken away. And it was just me, my ego, and my soul sitting with nothing else. And as I'm sure you brothers know, nature is one of the biggest mirrors. So everything that I was just spitting out it would shoot it right back into me, and I had to sit with it. So that was essentially the journey that started my rites of passage.
Foy, you mentioned earlier that the difference with this sort of initiation is the intention. And when I think about the initiations that we classically celebrate here, we have birthdays, we have bar mitzvahs, we have deaths, we have births. And so it seems to be in sync with something that happens in our life. And I'm curious for this one, like, what was your intention? Because as far as I could tell, it wasn't a point in time in life external to anything that you were doing internally.
Yeah. So my intention was to claim my power. Truthfully, being in this work, I knew the power that I hold. However, I was fearful of expressing it. And I noticed I would shy away from conversations with men that would inspire me because I was fearful I would get judged. So I would stray away and I wouldn't share my medicine. And a lot of the time I would sit and pull in kings into a room, but then I would go sit at the kiddie table and I would just let the kings sit with the kings. So for me, the intention was to claim my power fully and really step into the man I want to show up. And that was through joy. That was through leadership. That was through presence. And that was to inspire transformation. And that was actually my power statement, which we developed and I used to hone in and then really claim that. And truthfully, after those 4 days, when I got back, something shifted within me where I just started to express deeper. So my intention was to claim my power.
We got to dive deeper into what the 4-day experience was like. So let me tee up something, because you talk about the nature being a mirror and then you're being without, there's no more distractions, right? So we got to dig into that. Michael Singer, who has written The Untethered Soul and The Surrender Experiment, and I've been cracking out on his audiobooks and his lectures, he said something profound that I've been ruminating on for days now. And he says, the weakest part of who you are is running your life. The weakest part of who you are is running your life. Like, let that marinate for a second and just see if it's true. And what he means by that is, deep down inside, we're not okay. Like, we're not okay, right? Like, we're not okay about how we feel, which is why we're always in motion, which is why we're always distracting ourselves, which is why your mind is hyperactive. And if I look at the weakest part of myself, which is my fear of rejection, I've ended up building an entire life around not having to feel that feeling versus going into that feeling fully and then dissolving it and having no more power over me. So I can get really good at, and Brian, this is like the analogy of the thorn in the arm, and you make your whole life around that. I can become really good at speaking articulately, being very well read, knowing how to work a room, like knowing how to put out content that people will engage with. Also, that I don't have to feel what it's like to be rejected, but deep down inside, I still feel that fear of saying or doing something that has the masses turn on me and withdraw their love from me or tell me that I'm not special. So I can start to see how this weak part of my life is running. I've made my life about it in many respects. You go to the desert for 4 days, and whatever weak part of you that has been running your life is now screaming to the surface, right? Because there is no other distraction. There is nowhere else to go. What was it like during those 4 days, Voy? What were you confronted with? And what was it like to have like the sun beating down on you, or if it was raining, whatever it was? Give us like a play-by-play of what it was like to be in that and what came up for you.
Wow, that was beautiful, man. That was a potent question. And I love how you dropped that, because there's a few things that came up for me. So I appreciate you guys going in this direction. One of the things that comes to mind is prior to the rites of passage, I went and experienced essentially a burnout. So I was driven by fear. And because I was driven by fear, I would constantly just do and I wouldn't be. So it felt like the more I did, it wasn't good enough. I have to do more. And because the network that I have built around me is high performers, whenever they would kind of go above me, I would see that as unhealthy competition. And I would just stay up all night to make sure that I'm at the same level. And because of that, I didn't give myself time to just be, just to recover and create space for any integration or relaxation. So I got burnt out. And everything that I saw in my life was just boring, old, unpassionate. So when I went to this rites of passage, I got sent out and I climbed up this mountain, and it was this massive rock, and it was overlooking the Sierra Nevadas. Just beautiful. And I'm sitting on this rock and I'm just sitting here and I'm like, why don't I have my pure essence of joy? Where did I lose this joy? What is happening right now that I just don't feel joy? And because everything was just out the way, nothing was distracting me, I shot it and the universe and nature just shot it back. And I realized that I just wasn't fucking grateful. I forgot and lost myself in the process. And I just forgot to give gratitude for every place and celebration that I've been in. And that took out the fun from it. And then I started seeing visuals of my parents. I started seeing visuals of the brotherhood. I started seeing visuals of me quitting corporate. And all these emotions started to come over me. And I just started to burst in tears. And I'm sitting on this rock, hot as fuck. There's a storm coming. The mountains are in front of me. And I'm just bursting in tears for the gratitude that I have for everything in my life. And that was the first kind of like spark and the first day that really just started the transformation. Another beautiful story, which happened the same day, was when I set up my little camping spot, just put a book bag just to hang out, just to chill. I kept questioning myself if this is the right spot, because I was just afraid of claiming something, of showing my power. And this is something I believe in. So I put my spot there and then I walked around and I was like, you know what, maybe this isn't it. So I undid everything. I went to another spot. I tried to put it there. No, it didn't work. Went to another one, went to another. And I spent half my day because I didn't trust myself. Crazy enough, it's getting dark. Now I have no spot. There's a thunderstorm coming and I'm like, oh shit. I'm literally here by myself with no food. A storm is coming. What do I do? So I try to set something up real quick, trying to set up a spot, cut myself open. I'm bleeding everywhere now, literally blood gushing everywhere. And I'm like, holy shit, why is everything going against me? And then I realized I should have just fucking trusted myself from the start, because the first spot that I found is exactly what I needed in my life. However, because I didn't trust myself, I didn't trust the spot. And when I got that little breakthrough, I packed my shit up. And right before the sun went down, I set up the spot. And that's where I sat down to help myself gain that trust. And that became my little spot of inspiration.
I'm getting chills here, man, because you just said, I didn't trust that spot because I didn't trust myself, right? I didn't trust myself, therefore I didn't trust the spot. And as you were going back and forth through all these different spots, I'm just looking at my life and other men's lives that we have a chance to coach and look at, and how many different things we bounce to. It's like, well, this relationship's going to make me feel okay. This next job's going to make me feel okay. If I move out of here and I move to this place in the country, then that's going to make me feel okay. And we're just constantly doubting ourselves or constantly looking for something else versus like it's right here. Right. Let me set up shop. Let me trust myself and it will unfold the way that it unfolds. So you finally picked your spot and you settled in. Then what?
Then I bled. Then I bled onto a piece of paper for 4 days straight. The first question with regards to trust, and I'm so glad you brought that up because it's exactly what I asked myself. When I figured out that I wasn't trusting of who I am and the actions I took, I asked myself, where else is this showing up in my life? And I started to unpack and unfold this kind of vision as to where exactly I keep jumping from place to place to place. It always felt like this isn't it because it's not good enough, or this isn't good, or this isn't. And I just kept scrambling everything and I became scattered. So that started to open up a lot of things for me, which essentially helped me discover a deeper truth about myself, is that I didn't trust who I was and I didn't trust the power that I have.
Dude, what has come with that?
Man, liberation, if I could put it in the best term. You know, when you do something and you finally hit like a breakthrough and your body just releases and you could take that breath and you go, I just realized, and everything just started to click. And after that, literally every decision I took and every action I took, I just went 100%, this is it. And if it's not working out, that means life is showing me people and circumstances and opportunities where I'm not free. And that in itself is the work. And that is the game of life that I call, right? It's the resistance.
And Voy, like when you were in that space and you said that you saw all the things that you had to be grateful for, you also saw the brotherhood. Was that the beginnings? Was that the vision that you had for Modern Renaissance Man? Did that come to you there?
No, so that was the Rites of Passage was actually last year. The Brotherhood started about 2.5 years ago. However, the reason that the Brotherhood came up to me is because I sometimes would tend to forget that I have a community that is here to support me. And when I started to hit burnout, I went back into my old ways of trying to be a lone wolf, trying to fix it myself. And I said, you know what, even though I got this Brotherhood, it's all right. I don't want to put it on them. They got their own shit. You know, I'm the guy who's leading it. I got to be strong. I got to be stoic. It's all right. I'm going to figure out myself. So I went back into my old ways, which brought me into burnout, which when I was on the mountain, I saw that this is the way, this is the medicine that I need to keep leaning into. And then I claimed it once again that this is where I have to be. So when I came back, the first thing I did is reach out to my brotherhood, and I had them just hold me in that space.
Boy, that resonates so much, man. This idea of having the brotherhood, and I find myself there more often than I would like to admit, where I have guys like Dominic, we have our mastermind, we have our men's group, but man, that lone wolf, it feels so, it's mine. Like I can do it on my own. And I gotta tell you, it's really fucking slow, really isolating. And it's a really healthy reminder, man. I appreciate that like these guys are here to support. And the reminder that I have to give myself is, what would I do? What would I do for somebody else in the brotherhood? And it's like, well, obviously I would be there. I would do all the things. Like, why do I feel that might be different from me? So thanks for sharing that, man. That's a potent reminder.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a discovery I had when I dove deeper into why I was afraid to ask for support. There was a fear of asking for support. And I was able to root down the cause to my father, because my dad was a stoic first, a stoic second, and a stoic third. So there was no time for emotions. And this guy just never asked for help. I mean, if he had to put a roof on the house and he had to climb up the ladder and carry a piece of the roof to build it, he would do it. And as a kid, I saw my dad as a superhero. Like, he was the man. And whatever he did, this is something I wanted to embody, because my dad showed me how to be a man. My mom told me how to be a man. And you could see which one was more potent, right? The visual side of things. So I always leaned towards that. And it's something I embodied. I became super stoic, and I always led with that lone wolf mentality. I always led from that space. And if there was something I needed to ask for support, I said, it's okay. That feels weak. I'm a man. I have to be the man. I'm going to just do it myself. And that, as I'm sure you guys know, are familiar with, did not become too fruitful.
Yeah. I mean, we see guys who have been battling the same shit for years or even decades on their own, whether it's something with, I'm not good enough, or I'm the guy who puts the ball at the 5-yard line. I can't punch it into the end zone, constantly, like, finishing in second place or giving up right before. And it's just over and over and over again. And yet when men are invited to take that next step, they'll be like, no, I got this, or I'm not ready for it now. Or, like it may be financially, there's always like something where a guy is like, I'm just going to continue doing what I've been doing. And I know what that feeling feels like. I used to be that guy too, but it's like, can you just take a pause and look at how your way hasn't fucking worked? Like, let's just be really honest. Like, your way hasn't fucking worked. And that's why you end up here. And that's why, this conversation around rites of passage are so critical and necessary, because they can be painful, but they are a potent moment in time where there's a clear before and an after. And if a rite of passage is done well, you are not the same man that you were just a few days earlier, right? 4 days in the desert, dealing with the inclement weather with just water and no food is a painful, scary experience. But you can pretty much be guaranteed that like some shit that you have been carrying around for your life will be evaporated, dissolved, obliterated. And there will be a newer version of you that comes out the other side. And, one of my favorite books, I'll link this in the show notes, around the importance of ritual and these sacred experiences, is The Archetype of Initiation by Robert Moore. And he says there's 3 steps to that process of a rite of passage. The first step is the challenge, right? Your challenge, go into nature, 4 days, just water, no food. Second step is the transcendence of who you've once been. You transcend the ego. So you are no longer in that normal operating space. You're no longer in ordinary space. And then the third step is the reconstitution, right? Coming back from that experience, building back who you are, the new version of you. And we see that all the time in the hero's journey, right? Like, our hero has a challenge. He departs from his ordinary way of existence, and then he comes back a different person and then shares those gifts with others. What are some of those rites of passages that are available to men that are out there? And maybe like you provide that in Modern Renaissance Man. I know that we do that in the Great Man Mastermind. The Mankind Project does one of those rites of passage. If you go to one of their new warrior training weekends, if a guy's interested in doing something like that, where does he go?
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's a great question. And honestly, a few years ago, it's been a little bit tough finding a rites of passage that really resonates with the modern man. However, now, because this work has been really getting pushed to the surface, there's a lot of opportunity with what you mentioned, the Mankind Project, what you guys are doing. Modern Renaissance Man will be leading Rites of Passages next year as well. So we're actually in the process of creating that space for men to go out into the wilderness, as well as the brothers on the West Coast at Sacred Sons. I know they have a beautiful program and they're crushing it in that space. So those will be the first ones that come to mind that would really provide that experience for any man that wants to take it to the next level and just claim his power.
Beautiful. I'll link those in the show notes. Voy, why don't we move into conversations about rituals, masculine rituals? And I know that you have a Sacred Six morning ritual. What is your morning ritual, and what's the importance of having ritual in your for masculine practices in your life?
You know, for me, the importance and as to why I have a morning ritual is because it allows space for transformation. So it gives me the time to essentially put myself in third person, right? So for me, meditation or prayer or journaling, it creates space so that I could see what voice thinking on the piece of paper. I could see what's in my head, and I could see it from a third person and then start to see where there's a disconnect or what am I not seeing? Where is the lesson in that? So for me, it's creating space or transformation. And it's super important for a man to ground himself and drop into an intention for the day so he could show up in his power. As opposed to, you know, quickly waking up, going on Instagram and just getting bombarded with all of the things society wants us not to be. And, you know, for me, a ritual is just the essence of my being. It just helps me express who I am at my corest, deepest, truest level. And it really just helps me lead from a place of love. So for me, the Sacred Six includes a morning meditation, some movement, setting my intentions, reflecting, reading, and of course, taking some vitamins. So I try to hit mind, body, and soul. And that for me is every morning. And I'm curious just to drop it into this. I'm curious to hear what you guys have in store every morning for yourself to really help you align your energy, your mind, and your heart.
Bri, why don't you tell them what you do first thing when you wake up in the morning?
Well, first I sleep naked. It's an important visual for this story. And then I start with breath work. Dominic introduced me to something a couple of years ago called Mukha Bhastrika, where it's a very deep inhale. And then in order to get the entire exhale, get all the air out of the lungs, you got to bend over. And so my partner is less frequently appreciative of me doing Mukha Bhastrika first thing when I wake up. But yeah, I start with breath work, and that's usually the first thing I start with. And then I get the coffee going. I love my bulletproof coffee in the morning. And then I do a meditation. I journal. Then I start my day. Vitamins come later.
Yeah. You know, Voy, the thing that came up for me when you were talking about getting into Instagram versus like stepping back and doing one of these deeper practices was just imagine two men. One man wakes up every morning for 100 consecutive days and spends his first 20 minutes on Instagram. The other man wakes up and spends the first 20 minutes of his day doing breathwork, meditation, journaling for 100 days. Like those two guys, you know, one guy on Instagram every day for 20 minutes for 100 days, the other guy doing like these intentional practices.
I've been both of those guys, right? Like
Yeah.
I've been both of those guys,
Same.
and it's not like I just evolved and now that's all I do. I go back and forth, if I'm being perfectly honest, and I can tell a difference in my life, in my day, when I fall off that. When I go down the Instagram path as opposed to like my ritual path, it feels different. And to be more specific, I feel more anxious. I feel more fears. I feel more triggered. I don't know how to handle the triggers that happen. I'm less creative. I'm more operationally focused, less strategically focused. So like there's very real world and very real Brian life implications to not create. I love what you said, Voy. It creates the space to see what Brian's thinking as opposed to Brian just going and doing. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like, which guy would you trust more? Which guy would you put leadership responsibilities in the hands of? Which guy do you think would be the one taking a bite out of life versus life taking a bite out of him? I mean, you could go on and on and on about this. And for a man who's listening right now, who's just spent the last 100 days getting into Instagram in the first 20 minutes in the morning, this is not a moment for you to feel shameful. Like we've all just said, we've been that guy too. And shame, guilt, like those are really unnecessary emotions. It's just like, okay, wake up. Make the commitment right now to doing something much more intentional, like, because we've been there, just get back on the horse. So let's take this a step further, Voy, around other places that ritual can show up in really powerful ways in masculine practice, not just the morning. One of the things that I've witnessed in your container that you hold in your men's group, right? I was there last night, is you have some very similar ritualistic elements that we do in our mastermind. The first thing that you all did was called a collective sync. What is that, and what's the power of something like that in a group setting?
Yeah, that's beautiful. And in a group setting, I think personally, from my experience, the collective sync is the first key bridge to help men get from the mind and into the body, because we have life, we have businesses, we have kids, we have families. So we're all in different places at different times. And before we get into that group, our mind might not be in the actual container. It might be in the past or in the future. So doing a collective sync, whether it's through movement, meditation, breath work, whatever the case is, helps us as men drop in from the mind and into the heart, because that's where the true transformation happens. And with that, it's of course extremely potent to do in a group setting, because you feel the sense of community. And the analogy that I love to give is the 300. I'm sure you've probably seen the movie with Leonidas.
Sure.
And I tell our men is, when we stand together, we are those men with those shields. However, when one of those shields gets taken away, we're all vulnerable. So when we show up to these groups, we have to show up together, standing side by side with our shields, ready to rock and roll. So we leave anything that is maybe throwing us off behind, and we make sure we show up with the heart first, so that when we go to discovery mode, we show up from a place of truth.
Love it. And then the next thing you guys do is there's either the guidelines or 3-word check-in that you typically do. What is the 3-word check-in, and why is that important, again, for the group to come together?
Absolutely. So I see the 3-word check-in as an icebreaker. And depending on where the man is, we're trying to meet him where he's at. And not every man who comes into our group, our calls, is ready to express and speak his truth, because it's unknown, it's unfamiliar, it's scary. So by doing a 3-word check-in, it starts to invite a conversation, and it builds resonance between everybody else. Because there's guys that are dropping in with, I feel amazing, I feel happy, I'm sad, I'm triggered, I'm angry. And it creates resonance, it breaks the ice, and it also pushes a man to his edge. Because when he sees every man going and expressing his truth, he starts to create stories in his mind, and he's like, oh, what should I say? How should I say it? Are these guys going to think of something of me if I tell them I'm anxious, or I'm scared, or I'm nervous? And it starts to push this man closer to that edge. And that's where the growth happens. So depending on where the man is in his journey, a check-in could be something transformational.
Love it.
It's beautiful.
I mean, it's beautiful, right? So these are rituals that you can use inside of a group setting for men's groups. These are also beautiful rituals you can use in your romantic partnership.
Absolutely.
You're running around doing all sorts of different things all day long, and then you kind of flop together at the end of the day, and it's really easy to just kind of get lazy about that. But if you're the masculine practitioner there, and you reach your hand across to your partner and just say, hey, let's do a collective sync, right? And maybe that's a meditation. Maybe that's a breath work. Maybe that's some eye gazing. And so you drop from mind into body, and then that's followed with a 3-word check-in, or maybe, each person gets a 1-minute check-in. These are beautiful ways that you as a man or you as a masculine practitioner can lead the people in your lives, whether it's your romantic partnership or the business that you run.
And I would just want to drop this one piece to the listeners, if it's cool. With regards to these rituals, just like a collective sync and a 3-word check-in, it's something I actually apply to my own life on a day-to-day basis. And this is where I find true freedom. So what I mean by that is essentially whenever I get into a conversation where it's a disagreement or I feel triggered, right? Because there's something that this person is bringing up that isn't healed within me. Maybe somebody hurt me in the past and they have the same qualities, or it just hasn't resolved something within. That becomes an action signal for me. And I've been able to build this awareness when I feel that. I drop into collective sync real quick, take a breath, and I check in with myself. And I ask myself, what do I feel? I feel anxiety, I feel anger, and I feel fear. And when I pull those 3 up to my awareness, I then realize I'm like, holy shit, this is an opportunity for freedom. This is where the gold is. This is where the mental construct is. What is this teaching me? Where is it coming from? And then I started to go deep, find exactly where from my past that has been maybe started. And once I connect the dots, that becomes the freedom in itself. And I call it the game of life. So for me, the 3-word check-in and the collective sync is something I do on a day-to-day basis outside of the group itself. So just wanted to share that.
And you're able to do that like in conversation. So I can imagine you having some sort of conflict or argument. Are you able to do that in real time? Or is it something you take a pause, like time out, let's come back to this and let me re-engage?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my girl knows who I am and she knows what she got into. So whenever there's conversations and I feel the heat rising, I literally sometimes tell her just say stop. I tell her I'm feeling triggered. And I was like, I just need a moment right now to see where this is coming from. It's not about you. It's about me right now. And I just got to take a moment to pause and figure out where this is coming from, because this might cause more unnecessary tension. And I love you from the bottom of my heart. And I do not want to sabotage this beautiful relationship we have. So sometimes I even go for a walk, take a walk, refresh, ask myself the questions, and come back from a different state. Is that always the case? Of course not. Because sometimes I get so deep that I forget to take that breath and I'm so far in that it's just, we're just going hand to head. However, for the most part, I try to apply that as much as I can.
Yeah. We've gone through really two different things here. On one side, we've gone through the initiations or the rites of passage. Those seem like larger events, like big events, 4 days and 9 days in the desert, 4 days alone. And then we have rituals. And these are things that you do every day or you do frequently, right? Like the one that you just described. I'm going to take a page out of your book and ask for some help here, because I want to know if there's something in between. The reason I'm asking is I have my dad's sister, so my aunt, lives down in Florida. At the age of, I was probably about 12 or 13 years old, my cousin died from brain cancer. I remember being down in Florida at his funeral and not feeling. I knew I should feel sad because I knew him, we were close, but I couldn't really feel it. And I always wondered what that was about. Of course, I've done a lot of work since I was 12, 13 years old, and now can really feel those emotions when that comes up. Last week, that aunt passed away from COVID. And something I've been struggling with is that ritual of the funeral, of going there, of talking, we can't do. The family, they say, well, when the COVID's over, we'll come together and we'll go through that ritual that we've done many times before. And that's okay. But there's also something right now. And so my ask is, like, is there something in between that's not ritual and something we do every day, and it's not 9 days in the desert, but something that we can mark moments with, that we can mark, a transition? And I'm curious, in your experience, if you've seen anything that's kind of that in between.
Wow. Well, first and foremost, thank you for sharing your truth, man, and your vulnerability. That was potent. So I just want to take a minute just to honor that. That is honestly the first time I've ever came across that question. And the one thing that comes to me with regards to meeting it in the middle is prayer. That for me is somewhere in the middle. And the reason why I bring prayer into this experience is because prayer allows us to fully express without any judgment, without any fear of getting spoken about. And it creates that space, just like journaling does. It creates that space to see in third person and express whatever you need to express, whether it's to your aunt who passed away, whether it's to, maybe your cousin who passed long ago. And it allows you to really talk to that individual without having to pull back. So for me, what comes to mind truthfully, and this is the best that I got in the moment, it would be just prayer, which would be that one moment that I would sit with and just express fully what's on my heart, and also forgive anything that I may have caused to that person or individual that I still may be holding on. Because at the end of the day, the forgiveness starts with me, and I have to accept that first. And that's when I feel truly in my power.
I appreciate that. It's so simple and yet so potent.
Simple, but not easy.
Simple, but not easy. Yeah. And if there's anything else that does come to mind, and after this podcast is great also, because I think you've done such a great job in creating a community. And so how do you pull a community into that in-between experience? And maybe to keep it simple, maybe it is a collective prayer, right? Maybe it's just getting together and honoring in that way. So I appreciate that lead. Yeah,
absolutely, man. A celebration, right? We tend to look at death as something that's extremely fearful. It's something that, if somebody passes away, they're never coming back. And there's a lot of communities and cultures that actually look at death as a celebration. And that when people reach a death, it's an honor. It's a party. It's an experience. Everybody's enjoying, happy, and they just keep offering to these people because they essentially live on forever. So
yeah, a liberation of the soul that's been, stuck in a human body for however many years. That's another way of looking at it. So yeah, voy, that's the ultimate rite of passage. That's the one we're all heading towards, whether we like it or not.
We'll get there eventually.
Don't need any food or water for that, man. No desert necessary.
Brother, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And, when you talk about going deep, like we could have gone, hours deeper around any one of these topics. So obviously we'll have to continue our conversations in other forums and hopefully on this podcast again in the future. For a man who's listening, who's really resonating with you and your work, what are the ways that these guys can come either into your community or do work with you individually?
The social media platform where I'm most active on is definitely Instagram. They could find me at Voy, VOY_official. And if there's any curiosity with regards to the work that I do, the group that I'm a part of, or they just want to jam and talk about any subject, they could just reach out and let's vibe, let's get to know each other and just hold space. So that would be the first thing. The second is to visit our website, www.themrmofficial.com. And there's a lot more information on the movement that we have and how they could get involved.
I'm going to link those in the show notes. You'll see me in the mrmofficial.com group, and Voy's Instagram is a must follow. You've got some really great stuff coming out every day or regularly that I value, and it inspires me to think more deeply about the work that I'm doing. So it's great to have you on this path, brother. Thank you for sharing your stories. I've got so many more questions than I do have answers right now, but looking forward to forging that deeper relationship with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have one more question for you guys, and this might be it might unpack a little bit of thought. However, I'm very curious to hear how you guys have formed. There's some space in this podcast to dive into that, because I know you guys have a movement of your own. You guys have a community that you guys have created and are transforming men's lives. So I'm just curious to hear how you two brothers got together to create that special union, because I could feel that there's something energetically bonding you guys to this work.
Yeah. Brian, do you want to take that one?
Oh man, where did it start? I was running a sexual health company, and it's a longer story on how we got there, but I started speaking publicly about going through testicular cancer and having an STD at a point in time, and what that was really like. I learned that vulnerability really connects us. Dominic and I, we had known each other before, and I saw some of the amazing work that he was doing. And after doing some work with him, I went to one of Dominic's retreats in 2017. We just started doing, I think it was Saturday coffees. We would get together and we were jamming, and we started to realize, like, oh my God, like you went through that? I went through something like that. And so, like, for me, that was my first walk into like true brotherhood, true connection. So that's how at least it got started on my side.
Yeah. And Brian came to my first men's retreat back in 2017, like we were just talking about. And then after that, I think the next big hurdle was I started talking openly about sex addiction. It was the first time I talked about it publicly. I think it was in 2018. And I was running these live events in the city. And then Brian, I asked to be one of the speakers at that event, and people seemed to really like it. And so Brian and I just continued doing that speaker series. We called it the Discerning Dick, Sexual Wisdom for the Modern Man. And it was really, really well received, and women came. Most of our audience was women. Like I would say 60% of our audience was women. We had guys that, that were very interested and courageous too. And then the next step after that was like, okay, so many people are interested in hearing the story, but they can't come to this live event in New York. Why don't we start a podcast? And then that's where the podcast was born back in January of 2019. And then the mastermind was launched in 2020. It seems like every year there's kind of like a new thing. And then this year, the digital mastermind is going to be launching in February of 2021. So yeah, we just keep kind of like constructing.
Yeah, evolving.
Yeah.
That's beautiful, man. Just to follow up on that question, what has been the biggest challenge in enrolling men into your vision? Because this work is definitely right now, on the surface, it looks new. However, it's been around for forever. We as brothers have sat around a fire and we went deep, back, if we look into time. I'm curious to hear, what are some of the challenges that you receive from men with regards to this kind of work and creating and being a part of a brotherhood? The
biggest ones, Voy, I mean, they come in variety of flavors, but the categories all kind of like boil down to the same, which are, I don't have the time, I don't have the money, I have other people that I'm responsible for, other priorities, I'm afraid. And, the afraid one is they don't know what they're afraid of necessarily all the time. Like there's this fear of men and not trusting men, going into groups of men where they've always recognized groups of men as being, competitive. Getting their balls busted, getting teased, having their masculinity threatened. They've never been around a group of men who have been supportive vulnerable, open, wanting to see. So they don't know, they have no basis of comparison for it. I would actually say that's one of the biggest barriers, is like having no concept of what it could be like, how much better it could be, how burnout is not normal. Like it's the furthest thing from it.
Nor a badge of honor.
Yeah. Nor something to be celebrated or applauded or aspired to. Yeah. So I think it's actually like an inability to grasp a different vision that could be so much better because of all the gunk that's caked on.
Right. Perspective is medicine. And when people get inspired to see a different kind of perspective, it changes their life. And just to wrap it up, because I know I'm taking you guys' time here, just for the people that are listening, and I know there's a lot of brothers that might be at the edge and they might experience some of that, maybe shame or guilt, or might not have the time, or they don't have the money, or they're busy. What is the outcome of the brothers that you had who joined the brotherhood, who have felt your medicine, your experience? What has been the outcome on the other side of these men who went through a mastermind and have been a part of something special like you guys have created?
The number one thing, Voy, that I see is these guys are so inspired by themselves in a way that they've never felt before. That's the bottom line, is like they're feeling lit up by themselves. When I say that, it's not like by themselves on their own isolated. It's just, I am inspired by who I am. I had no idea I was this powerful. I had no idea I was this creative. I had no idea that I was capable of this. And oh my gosh, I had no idea I was capable of loving these guys so much and loving my partner so much, or being this great of a father. They get so excited by what they're capable of. That's the early awakening. And then as guys are on this deeper journey, like a Brian, who's been on this journey for 4 years now, it's more about the rewards of building the community and seeing other men thrive in that space. So it kind of goes from this, whoa, look at me and what I'm capable of, to let's help other guys to figure that out for themselves also. And then it just keeps paying it on forward.
I love seeing guys that are doing breath work for the very first time. And then afterwards, it's almost like looking at a baby who's discovered a lemon for the first time. Like, whoa, this is wild. It's totally different. I didn't know my breath could do this, even though I've been doing it my entire life. So I love seeing those.
Exactly. You see the guys that first did their breath work, and you see you pull up on the street and they're in the car like, they just can't get enough of this shit. Yeah. And truly, Dominic, something you just brought, which I want to highlight, is you mentioned essentially that men get inspired to claim their own power, which is already innate within us, right? I think life is about unlearning as opposed to learning, because everything we have is already within. And the fact that you guys help men inspire that inspiration then gets transferred into the world, which actually is forming a lot more conscious leaders. So you guys are just forming the leaders of today, which is super inspiring, man. And I appreciate you guys for all the work that you do.
Voy, at the very beginning of this podcast, we talked about dropping gems, and I feel like there is just a trail of gems behind you. So thank you for sharing those with us, man.
Absolutely, man.
All right, gentlemen, it is time to take action on one of the things that you learned from Voy Wiancek, the founder of the Modern Renaissance Man community, from this episode today that you're going to put into practice. Either today, tomorrow, very near future. So this doesn't just become some intellectual thing you did, but you're actually creating change regularly in your life. If every episode you listen to, you take one piece of action, and we do 2 episodes a week, you're talking about 100 actions over the course of a year that are getting you closer to living that great man within you. One of those actions could be taking a look at joining our Great Man Within digital mastermind community, which just went live over this past week. This is your opportunity to find your tribe of men who can call you to a higher standard. It's an opportunity to stop drifting, stop all those false starts that you've had of doing personal development on your own, and to join a group where there's accountability. Every month, I'm leading a workshop on a particular topic like courage, fortifying your inner foundation, beating back drift. I release a series of modules every month that go on our online curriculum, and we have a special guest every single month, like Eric Maddox, the interrogator who caught Saddam Hussein, who's going to be our special guest on February the 17th. Monica Yates, who is one of our most popular guests on how to lead your woman in the bedroom, is going to be our special guest for March. Guys, this community is thriving. The work we're doing here is fantastic. And if you are looking to step forward to that next level of you living that great man within you, come take a look at the Great Man Digital Mastermind. I'm linking that in the show notes. See you there.